Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani and welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from narcissistic relationships. We're going to take on a very specific issue that I actually feel has been a real oversight in me and not addressing it enough, which is how much worse narcissistic abuse and toxic relationships are when you don't have resources, when you don't have money. Listen, if you don't have a lot of money, narcissistic relationships will actually take a far, far greater toll on you. Not having enough money is a stressor. It saps your bandwidth. There's good research showing that. And it can mean that solving any problem becomes far more complicated. Problems are a lot easier to fix when you've got money. When you don't have money, you may not be able to afford good quality therapy. Could be that the free therapy you can access may not be well matched to what you need. You may have an unstable housing situation. You may not have access to reliable transportation. You may be living with food insecurity. You may not be able to get ahead of your debt and do the things that would help with stress management, like a day off. Even in the best of circumstances, not having financial resources is a horrible stressor. If you're dealing with a toxic relationship, it literally feels almost impossible. And you might even feel that all the content out there doesn't even begin to scratch the surface on what you're going through. A lot of the guidance on narcissistic abuse, and I'll be very open and frank, I believe I've made that mistake too, assumes that people have some level of resources, access to therapy, the ability to move somewhere else if you need, the luxury of launching into a job search, having enough time to be able to journal or meditate, being able to afford an attorney, to get health care. If you don't have resources, you may even be stuck living with a very narcissistic family of origin, or having some of them live with you. You may not be able to afford a caregiver for an elderly narcissistic parent who needs care, or not being able to balance childcare. So you may get stuck in a job with an abusive boss just because the hours or the locations work. And because of this, when a person who has limited resources, limited money, is in a narcissistic relationship, even if they want to leave, for example, leave a marriage or a long-term relationship, honest to goodness, it's almost simply not possible. I live in Southern California where rent is eye-wateringly expensive. And hell, even middle-class folks who even own their houses are stuck staying married because they can't afford to split the equity in the house, because half of that money, even if they made a lot of money on that house, won't buy anything here anymore. And if that money is just used on rent, it's going to run out pretty quick. People also may not be able to move away, where they may have better supports or more affordable housing. If they have minor children, then they have to stay often where they are, near the other co-parent, even if that person's toxic. So then radical acceptance isn't exactly the same as it would be for someone who has resources. Radical acceptance, sadly, then kind of becomes an acceptance of stuck, like really stuck. And that's going to have a very different kind of mental health toll. So many people are stuck in these toxic relationships because they simply do not have the means to get out. They can't afford an attorney, or childcare, or rent, or therapy. And so they stay in something that is continuing to take a pretty marked toll on them, on top of the stress that not having enough money is already causing. You already feel so helpless in one of these relationships. Nothing you say works, makes it better. Nothing you do works. You have to give up so much of yourself just to get through most days. And hope is a dangerous thing, since it is likely to go south really fast. The not having resources is a multiplier on that helplessness and hopelessness. And there's also the added frustration that most of the content out there on narcissism and narcissistic relationship, videos, books, whatever, most of it is based on having some access to resources, enough to get some basic help. But listen, if you don't have money, you may not even have a great internet connection or a reliable cell service or the stuff that would even allow you to listen to a video like this or get a book or get the information that you need on a regular basis. When I started thinking about this video, I didn't have any easy answers. I don't think I do still. The best I was hoping to offer up was an empathy and a recognition, frankly, that there's a double helplessness that people who do not have financial resources face. And as a result, people in these circumstances may also feel more shamed or self-blaming. Look at me, I'm staying in something that's so unhealthy. It becomes important to understand the logistics of why you're staying. It's a reason a lot of people stay. You may end up moving back in with a narcissistic family of origin, and that can feel horrible. It can be just absolutely horrible. But you can also see it wholly, fully, and armed with what you know about how these dynamics and systems work. Learn to talk to yourself internally in a different way. None of this is easy. Being exposed to that, even when you know what it is, takes a toll on you. Realistic expectations are available to anyone, regardless of how many resources they have. And in the case of folks who are strapped and living close to the bone, to understand that your decisions, while they may not be optimal, are informed by those realistic expectations as well. That you may be having to make decisions that will protect children or other family members or yourself. As I talk with more people around the world about this, financial limitation is jumping out at me as a major issue that people facing narcissistic families and relationships and workplaces are grappling with. And while you do not and will not have the luxury of making the big changes in a safe way that someone with money could, there are still the micro changes that are a possibility. Practicing not going deep, not defending, not engaging, not explaining, not personalizing. Engaging in little steps to break out of the self-blame. Finding small ways of stretching into your true self, even if it's laughing loud at something when you are alone, or having something you love reading and keeping it to yourself so it isn't ridiculed. And definitely no longer looking to the narcissist for validation or recognition, sharing information with them that they're just going to invalidate, and learning to disengage in a very intentional way. I know that all of this is still putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound, but those tiny changes and recognition that these relationships are never any of our fault is crucial. But I do think that people who are trying to cope with narcissistic abuse with very limited resources are facing a very, very unique kind of steep slope. And so much of the conversation often becomes about that what we call psychosocial stuff, housing and transport and childcare and jobs and money. And all of that's obviously survival level stuff. But lost in this conversation can often be the additional toll a toxic relationship is putting on someone and the absolute inescapability of that circumstance. The inescapability, the powerlessness, the inability to turn it off, the lack of capacity for safe escape can often mean that what accumulates in these relationships can slowly but surely accumulate into what feels like complex trauma. I hope that's helpful, and thank you again.